Let's go ahead and get started. Corinne, are you okay starting?
Absolutely. Good to go.
I just,
And hey, I just want to add one more thing. Your last point, you said possibly going 8 foot. I understand the sidewalk standard now for Caltrans, is it 6 feet, guys? 6 foot
It is
sidewalks?
6 feet. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
oh, well, that's
So
good.
yeah, we're not far.
So
Now, go ahead.
So I'm just going to ask, how reasonable is it to ask for 2 more feet and maybe some where it makes sense, some islands, some refuge for pedestrians trying to cross the highway. I don't know if you need to sliver up the lanes to 11 foot or one of them or the median, anything like that. Is that a big heartache? Is that doable just to, not ask for a whole lot, but do something that makes sense? And at the end of the day, you're transforming that strip from a passing zone to something people can cross.
Well, before we get too far ahead, one thing I want to point out on this project, so there's a bunch of sections of sidewalk when we did our walk. There's areas to the north up by the processing plant. That sidewalk is 4 feet wide. Throughout most of town, it appears that the sidewalk is mainly 5 to 5.5 feet wide currently. In front of the new Arco gas station, they installed a 6 foot sidewalk through there. There's a lot of smaller little obtrusions, I should say, by intersections and things like that, kind of weird little spots that we're gonna have to figure out as a design team. But one thing we don't have here is an awful lot of money. We only have, I just had that. We only have programmed for construction $11,700,000 for our total project, and almost half of that, if not more, maybe obviously asphalt prices are really low right now, but when this project goes to construction, scheduled for the spring of 2024 for construction, we're going to have to assume that asphalt prices are back to where they normally would be, and a good chunk of our budget's going to get eaten up by just repaving through town in Gridley. So one of our first steps is to identify how much work we could really do here with the funds that we have. There's a lot of work that needs to take place between Liberty Road and Dollar General on the south end of town there, regarding drainage, including sidewalk, everything like that. Just bringing in that sidewalk there is going to be quite an effort. So obviously we just started zero phase, so I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We were thinking of going for a design exception to keep the sidewalks at 5.5 feet through town. But we need to get way more involved. I mean, we just did our initial sidewalk last week or week before last. We need to get environmental out there. We need to find out the right of way. There's a lot more to it. So
hey,
I'm not
Chris,
sure.
this is Kevin in planning. So we have the ability to get more funds, and so all of these things that we would want to add would be in addition to what you already have.
Okay,
so
exactly. Right now is what, for this meeting here.
Yeah. So if we write this application, it's selected by District 3, and we move it to headquarters, and we have, $3 million of improvements that we want to add for complete streets elements, that would add it to your project.
Exactly. I just wanted to make clear that, even though our standards are 6 foot sidewalk everywhere, with our current scope, we may not be providing that.
Okay.
Yeah. Because honestly, there's not much of an effort. If we're going to increase the sidewalk by 6 inches, maybe a foot, and it costs us, X amount of dollars to get there, at this point in time, I'm not sure if it's really worth it for the project to carry on. But obviously, we need to get involved and look a lot more. And, we're infancy stages of this. So I couldn't give you a a real good answer one way or another.
Hey, Chris.
Ideally, we would love to provide the 6-foot sidewalks everywhere, but I'm seeing that as a constraint right now with our current budget.
Hey, Chris. This is Trent. Is it?
Yes.
Is Chris? Christopher? Hey.
Yeah,
Hi,
Chris. Yeah, just Chris.
Hey, so I'm a city engineer. Work for Paul here in Gridley. So one of the things that I think would be good to consider is anything on the west side. If there's 5 feet already, try to get 5 feet minimum, but get an exception to keep that and not have to tear it up just to get another.
When you say,
6 inches.
let's just stop. When you say west side, would that be the side of
McDonald's?
Say
McDonald's.
on the McDonald's side. So we have no intention right now of touching anything on that side of the street except the ADA ramps, bringing them up to code at the intersections. All of our work will be on the east side of the street.
Okay, because you do have a couple of gaps on the west side, just north of McDonald's. I think there's a little gap.
Yeah, and
on
that
the
through
sidewalk.
through like the Ford dealership and all of that. So that was why I included the scope of work for what we have programmed in. That work is not programmed into our project. We are not touching anything on the west side of the road except the handicap ramps.
Okay.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Let me just real quickly, Trent, is you are amplifying the reason why this program for complete streets is in place. That's the goal, to do these little gaps, to augment what you're already doing as part of the SHOPP program. The Caltrans is setting aside $100 million statewide for these types of efforts. And I think there's 40 or 60 million. I reverse them. I don't remember exactly how much is available. So that's what we're trying to make sense. Is there something that makes sense while you move into developing this project? Does it make sense to do it all?
Absolutely. Nope. Sounds great. And yeah, and we're more than willing to take it on as long as we have the funding. So
yep.
I just want everyone to know exactly what our current scope is based on the packets, the project report that I provided you all yesterday via email. I think that's important to know. And then obviously if we could obtain more funding and do more work to make it more of a complete street, I think this is a golden opportunity as we're going through town to do that. There's a lot more utility issues, poles, things of that nature, right of way on the west side of the street. But that's something we could absolutely look into and get started. I'm excited for this project. So if we could add more to it, you know, I'd say absolutely. But
okay,
I guess
and that's why we're scrambling. That's why we're scrambling to meet in such short notice, because this short 3-page application is due next week.
Now, do you need to put any funding things down, or I mean, what is the 3-page application really? How much information do you need to provide? Are we going to be able to massage this out a lot more, or do you need to kind of have a final scope of what you're trying to add by the time you do that new application?
I don't. Yeah, Kevin, can you touch on that? I don't have it in front of me.
Well, the application will be due to us next week. Applications are ultimately due to headquarters in September, and they'll make the final decision on what projects will move forward. And then by the end of this calendar year, beginning of 2021, we would need to revise the PID and have that information in there. So I think we would be ballparking it at this point. And obviously it's going to, I think, get massaged as we get further into the process. I think we're just looking for a good ballpark as to kind of what we want to add, how many feet of sidewalk, how many miles of bike lane, whatever. There's a spreadsheet that goes along with it that just kind of outlines how much stuff we're going to be adding, and then the unit costs for those things. I think one of my biggest concerns, and maybe Trin, you can answer this one, is you were at some of the public meetings years ago when this was going to be a much bigger project, and there was, you know, I know there was a lot of opposition to roundabouts, and that's not included in this, and so that's probably a good thing. But it seemed like the community wasn't real thrilled with the potential for expanding too much outside of the existing right of way because of the loss of parking and things like that. And so I just want to make sure, because that is one of the big things with this program, is that you have you've done the community engagements and everybody's on board with it.
Right. So there was an extensive outreach, as you know, and we do have a report that came out of that.
Mhm.
The ATP report once your consultant finished up. So we do have a good plan in place, a design guideline in place, and I think for now this project, I think if we focus on the gap closures, and you do have one gap closure program here, the one between the mini storage and that end. So we have, if we could get those cost estimates, then we can use those as a gauge for the remaining funding that's needed to close the remaining gaps and to widen that sidewalk, as Yvonne mentioned, the long sidewalk between Liberty and Dollar General. I think we have some go-bys if we can identify those items in your cost estimate, and I can look through the report, Chris, on the see how much of that from the 11.5. But those would be some good guidelines as far as cost estimating for now, Kevin, and we could do that to put a dollar figure if that's what's needed in the application. I imagine it does need an estimate in there, right? In your
Where's Dollar General?
That's at the end of the existing sidewalk on the east side. It's a new development. It's I'll say it's across kind of across McDonald's.
Okay, so south.
On the
Okay.
south end of town, right where you
okay.
start to hit Civilization as you come up.
I got
There
you.
you
All the
go.
businesses.
Yes.
I got you.
Yeah.
So you're thinking if we were to extend sidewalk south of Dollar General?
Well, that's it. That's in the. Okay.
Yeah, we're going all the way to Liberty Road right now.
Okay.
So part of our scope project, but I'm going to tell you right now, that's where all of my budget's going to be soaked up at, because there's a lot of work to do there.
Correct. So
Going
if
from Liberty Road to Dollar General is going to take most of the budget.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like Christopher was saying, you're kind of leaving Civilization. So when you do that in that area, you're dealing with drainage. What are you going to do with the road drainage, curb gutter, sidewalk? How are you going to drain? How are you going to put your sidewalk in? So all those things. It's just a roadside.
Exactly. There's a canal that we cross. Yeah. There's a bunch of there's a lot of civil engineering issues occurring there.
I'm with you, Chris. And that's where if this project, this complete street says, hey, we'd like to get this to 8 feet, then we have to estimate for those, try to get you the funding there to do this. And Yvonne mentioned something that I think is probably worth looking at as you get into your report is, can we move the lanes over a little bit to the east? Can we reduce some lanes from 12 to 11? We've done those type of things in some other Main Street type projects, if you will, as they come into a town like this. So it provides two things. One is that it slows traffic down, traffic calming, and it'll give us the 2, 3 feet, 4 feet more that we need to make this happen and minimize our costs as we get through this area. And man, it would be great to have a little bit of separation from your 8-foot path to your travel lanes. You have a lot of truck traffic, and we all walk down our sidewalks in our neighborhoods, but it's a lot different when you're next to a highway like this. It's just really not comfortable if you don't have a little bit of separation. So anyway, we can look at all those, but we have to be cost effective. And I got you, Chris. I mean, we got roadside drainage, trees. I mean, it adds up pretty quick. So that's what this project hopefully will do, is get us a few more dollars to help you do that and come up with a good path, 8-foot path that we can focus on that side of the street. So that's kind of the thought we had when we left the other project. So Kevin, I'm not sure if I answered.
So then you're not trying to, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to make sure that the community is good with that. I mean, I can't imagine that they wouldn't be okay with adding a couple feet of a wider sidewalk. I think my biggest concern was, I know that a lot of the businesses in town, probably north of Dollar General, didn't want any of their parking being taken away and things like that. And I just want, is that a possibility that could happen? And along the same lines, bike lanes, Is that, at all possible? Is that something Gridley wants? Is it Gridley want bikes to use a parallel route? And Chris, is it feasible to get more right of way to add bike lanes? It seems like it could
Yeah.
be tight. So.
No, I think
Yeah,
I'll kind of work with Trin here on this one. So, one thing, would we just be trying to, part of this, are we just looking at trying to enhance what we already have, our current scope to go from 6 foot to 8 foot? That's basically what we're trying to go for this additional complete streets funding for, not to add more scope, but just to enhance what we already have.
Yes.
I think
Okay.
so. I think so.
You could add more scope. That is entirely possible, but it seems like in this case, we're just enhancing what's there, which to me is a lot easier to do, as far as the application is concerned, than adding all these different complete streets elements that's going to add scope and cost.
Now, I know, I'm pretty new on this project, so I don't have all the back history. But in the project report, it stated pretty clearly that business owners and the public did not want bike lanes on that road of 99, that it was supposed to be on the surface streets adjacent to it, running parallel, that's where they were trying to focus the bike paths to. So one thing that we have when we looked at the site, if we don't take right-of-way from parcel owners, but we come into the highway itself with any right-of-way that we would need, which would be our own, it looks like the road through there, it's plenty wide. The curb, it's a red fire lane all the way through town on that side. It's a meandering sidewalk also. There's a few little weird spots that we need to fix. There's a grate like in the middle of the road that needs to be upgraded and honestly just taken out and put a manhole in. We need to change out some of the drain grate inlets, probably to some more standard drain inlets. And that would just enhance safety if anybody was maybe riding their bike down that road. But I think we do have enough right-of-way, even down the Liberty Road to Dollar General side. We need to verify this, but based on the project report that I have, it shows our right-of-way line goes back pretty far. And when we walked it, I saw the fence lines.
Yes.
And if those are correct, then we will have some tree removal. It looks like those were more like a sycamore tree. I only saw like 2 valley oaks that wouldn't, that you'd really want to stay away from, and we probably could. I don't know if our construction would be impacted, but we could mitigate for that anyway if we needed to. So it sounds like everything's pretty doable. We could, with the additional funds, increase the sidewalk width to 8 feet. Right now, just with walking it, I mean, obviously we have a lot more to dive into, but it looks promising. It looks like we could do that.
As a cyclist with an 8-foot sidewalk or path, there's no way in hell I would be on the highway, especially through there.
Yeah, I agree.
Or tell your kids to ride along that highway. Nobody's going to do that.
Yeah. And if you're able to sliver the lanes a little bit, then that shortens the distance to cross if you're a pedestrian. And if there's areas that make sense to have a little refuge, even better.
Yep.
I think that was the opposition that was at those public meetings, that people were against the bike, people bike riding in that State Highway 99 is because everything's so fast over there. So that was a lot of the concerns that got brought up.
And they were connecting that to possibly losing parking as you try to widen to allow bike lanes and all that. And I think if we stay within the right of way, we have space like Chris described. I think there's room to do some things that would really improve pedestrian and a path through here. Especially, I think if we focus on the east side for this wider path as we come in. And once we get into town, that may take a while, but I think there's width there, Chris, and we eliminated all the parking already. So there's opportunities to make use of that for pedestrians and a path along that side. So, okay, so that would be great if we could pull this together to get Kevin's application what he needs in scoping, And then the other item, as Yvonne mentioned, is a crossing. I think eventually we need to look at a pedestrian crossing, something like what you guys did. Are you guys familiar with Cherry Street? You guys put in there push button, ped crossing, right? Kevin, what I'm thinking is right there by at where where civilization starts, as we just mentioned, right there where the current sidewalks begin. Somewhere right in there, people are going to cross, because if you're coming from Liberty on the east side, you're going to want to go to Subway or McDonald's, and you're going to cross. They're going to cross there. So at least one crossing. You know, we'll look at whether we need any other, but most of the other side. You know, to the north, it's I mean, to the south. I mean, I don't know that we really need another crossing. You already have Liberty, so there's a crossing there with their signal push button. So anyway, a pedestrian crossing would be the only other item.
And that's the purpose of this program, complete streets. So where it makes sense and be sensible, you know, don't want to go over, you know, overboard.
Yeah, and I think this would be the right opportunity to do that as well. As we're coming in, you know, it's basically a CAP-M as well. You know, yeah, now would be the time with this project would be the time to add that additional crossing if everyone so desires and we have the funding for it. I would definitely agree. One thing, since I have you on the phone, Trin, to the north end of town, up by that processing plant. One thing I noticed was a lot of semi trucks kind of queuing before they went in, and it was almost starting to block traffic as that queue line when I was up there was filled, and some semis were not very happy that they didn't have room up there. Has that been discussed at all or more formalized on how up there would need to be? We have a 4-foot sidewalk that's right in front of that processing plant. I'm not sure who the property owners are up there. Like I said, we just started. But up there's a little bit of a challenge as well. And I'm not sure if it would make sense to have 8-foot sidewalk up through there. You know, quite honestly, as there's really no development or homes up there for the community that it would serve. I was just wondering if there was an idea of what that area should look like at the end of the day when this project's over.
Okay. And Chris, just to clarify, you're talking north, so north of the mini storage?
Yes, north of the mini storage where we have to, right at the mini storage is where the sidewalk ends again. I believe that's a 5-foot sidewalk. It ends, and then it picks back up in front of, I believe it's a nut processing plant. And it's right at the edge of our project limits is up there.
I got you. Yeah, I think we ought to look at that and then including bringing the Paul up to date and see what we think there. Yeah, I agree. There's not a whole lot of pedestrians right now in that area that I could see coming back into town. So
I'm not familiar with that. Is that a job center or what's out there?
It's changed hands a few times, and I'm not exactly sure what's in there now. But it's an employment center and processing. So most folks drive in. But I think your question from Chris was there seems to be trouble with trucks turning in. Is that what you're saying? They're kind of stopping to turn in?
They were queuing. They were waiting for some reason. And I'm not sure why. I mean, obviously we're early on. We're gonna have to engage the the plant operation manager or whatever's going on there, find out what's going on. I'm not sure why they're queuing on the highway instead of pulling in.
I drive that quite a bit, and I hadn't noticed that. So it might have been a specific event or something going on, or maybe a certain time where they were loading or offloading or something was going on. But we definitely should look at that and decide if we need a right turn lane or pocket to get these trucks out of there, out of the main line.
Because they already have a pocket. Yeah, they already have a pocket. It's just not really defined well, but they have enough where they could pull off of a shoulder that's paved. To get over there. But I'm just wondering kind of what their function is and then how it's going to interact with pedestrians and exactly with how all of that's going to work together.
Absolutely. Let's just walk that and Paul will know exactly what the future is there and what would be best for future development and what the city has planned for that area. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Let's make sure we do the right thing there. Okay.
So that everyone's aware, so our PAED phase really just started up right now. We just opened up zero phase, and we are we're in zero phase all the way through March of 2022 right now. So I think it was 19 months that we have it open. And one thing I do have to say is we do not have this project, the funding and the way that it kind of was distributed, it's a little wonky in my eyes. So I don't have a lot of money to spend in zero phase.
We got Paul is joining us. Hey, Paul, are you there? Can you hear us? You need to unmute yourself.
Hey there.
Good morning.
Can you hear me now? Good morning.
can.
I am
Yep,
so
we got you.
sorry. I had another meeting.
All right, Trent, do you want to recap while I go fill up my coffee?
Yeah, sure. Maybe we start off with there was just a question, Paul, from Chris, Caltrans, regarding the processing plant to the north of town, just north of the mini storage. Do you know what's the operation there? Who owns that, or what's the operation there, Paul? Sorry, I know it's changed a little bit.
No, it's historically all the same. It's Rio Pluma.
Okay, and there we were noticing that there's quite a few semis that are stacking up on the highway as they're coming off into the place. Do you know if that's been a problem, or was that kind of an isolated situation? You ever have any calls or problems with trucks stacking on the highway?
We don't have a problem. I've noticed it, but it's not become problematic that I'm aware of.
Okay. And I think, Chris, what you're saying is this project that's programmed, the CAPM has some sidewalk. That's the gap closure between mini storage and that processing plant. Is that correct, to the north?
That is correct. That's included in our project right now.
Okay. So what we're looking at, Paul, is just reviewing that with the Caltrans folks and make sure that we do what's needed in that area. If a sidewalk's needed, or where best to just make sure we got the right improvements and we're doing what's needed there in that area. We do have the sidewalk, Paul, as you saw on the what Chris sent yesterday, to the south of town between Liberty and the Dollar General. So that was the main piece that we were very concerned with. That is in the scope of this CAPM project. It's in there as their standard is 6-foot sidewalk. This morning we've been discussing to bringing in some additional funding through the Complete Streets program that we have an opportunity right now to request and see if we compete for that and get awarded and make that more of a path to go, instead of 6 feet, go to like 8-foot width. And that would be more of a designated pedestrian bike path to the south of town. Chris was just letting us know that it is going to take some funding and a little bit expensive because of it's really undeveloped in that area. So you have trees, you have drainage, but everything we see appears that we have the right of way, and we may have the width to work with to make something happen and make it where it's more accommodating and welcoming for pedestrians and bikes to travel on an 8-foot path through there. So that's kind of the main focus of this discussion, is seeing if we can't tap into the Complete Streets program to bring in some additional funding to make that happen. The rest of it to the north and through town, we would work with Chris and the Caltrans team to see what we can do within the scope of the project to fill some gaps in sidewalk, address ADA, and then also the other item was bring in possibly another crossing of the highway pedestrian crossing, similar to what Caltrans has done. A good job there at Cherry Street with the push button pedestrian crossing, high visibility crossing with the median refuge. Somewhere in the vicinity of the subway to the Dollar General, so that as people come in from the north, people come in from the south and they get to the urban limit of the city, they have a place to cross and they're not trying to just run across the highway, because I think that's what's happening now as people want to go over to Subway or McDonald's, they're crossing somewhere in that area. And I think it would be good to look at another pedestrian crossing with a push button median refuge. So those are the things we're looking at and possibly being able to bring in through the Complete Streets program. And we do have Kevin on the line also, who's taking in the applications for these Complete Streets that are due next week on the 12th. I think I had the date.
Yeah, they're due on the 12th. So I guess that might be the next question of who is going to write and submit, and maybe it's a team effort. Because it sounds like Trin and maybe Yvonne, you guys have a lot of the local knowledge of what's going on to be able to kind of sell it. I think that, Nima can work with Chris and be able to I don't think it's going to change any of the timing on anything, really. So I think all that stuff would end up being the same. We would just have to determine, what is that length of the additional 2 feet of sidewalk on the east side from Dollar General to West Liberty, and kind of start putting some numbers and some unit costs to that, and then a crosswalk. And I don't know can't imagine that the crosswalk would be all that expensive to do as well, but I think it might just have to be a team effort on this one. And I don't know if anybody agrees, disagrees, wants to balk at it, whatever you want.
No, and Paul, I just want to, I don't know if you covered it or not. Caltrans has set aside $100 million in the SHOPP program for Complete Streets efforts. So on the state highway, existing SHOPP projects, short turnaround time frame required, and what makes sense to go after. There was some talk about bike lanes, but really that path, if you do an 8-foot sidewalk per se, nobody's going to ride on the highway. Are there things where Caltrans can do, sliver up the lane width where need be? Some traffic calming measures, I think would be a win-win for the community and for Caltrans and working towards a Complete Streets goal.
So I want to also bring up, oh, sorry, go ahead. Continue on, Ivan.
No. Just to are there any immediate concerns that come to mind? We don't want to go after anything controversial, anything that's going to throw off Caltrans's existing schedule, especially this round. But, at the end of the day, does it benefit the community?
Well, for this project here, I've heard that we're looking to go from Liberty Road up to Dollar General with the 8-foot sidewalk. And that's great. I think it would be a welcome addition. And the additional funds to be added would be fairly minimal, obviously, because you're really just looking at construction costs, because our project would cover everything else because we're already in there and doing it. Paul, the one thing I want to point out to you, we went out and walked this site with our engineering team and kind of our core team members the week before last. We've noticed that the sidewalk from basically Dollar General all the way up to at least kind of past the Arco, well, up to the Arco station, most of that sidewalk is between 5 and 5.5 feet in width already. I don't think it makes much sense to go in there and rip up all of that sidewalk to make it 6 foot for our, to make it up to our standards, just to add an extra 6 inches of sidewalk. And we'd be spending, $1 million to do that. In my opinion, it doesn't make sense. Now, if we could go 8 feet the whole way, it makes more sense. And obviously thinking long-term for the future of the city, it probably would make sense too, if that money is available. Because I was telling the team here, I'm probably going to be going for a design exception throughout most of town where we have 5-foot plus sidewalks Because one thing I am limited on is funding. I only have 11.7 million. We're going to be coming in and repaving from, I believe we even have to go over the top of what they've just finished at Liberty Road. That was a really thin overlay that they did. But our project has new asphalt from Liberty Road all the way up to the basically the mileage sign at that tower at the end of town past that nut processing plant. So you get all new asphalt that whole way, and that's most of our budget. When we're gonna close that gap between Liberty Road and Dollar General, that's probably gonna suck up the rest of it. So if we have to go through town and deal with utilities and anything that we have to deal with to just add 6 inches to a foot of sidewalk, that's gonna be a very limiting factor for our project, and something that I would advocate trying to get off of our plate through a design exception. If we could add funds here to make that an 8-foot sidewalk throughout, you know, that's something that we could absolutely include, and now would be the time to do so. The road width through there is pretty wide. As we walked through with our team, we thought we could not impact a lot of the property owners there by maybe shifting the curb and gutter over into the street a little bit more. That's all a red fire zone anyway. You have a lot of drainage and drain grates there that we would like to change out, possibly to a drain inlet, make it a little bit more safer if someone were riding their bike through there. But we are kind of limited with funds here with the amount of scope that we have to do on the south end of town. So I did want to make you aware of that. We have a lot of homework to do and figure out just exactly where we are and what we can do. Our PAED phase just kicked off. It goes until March of 2022. So we have quite a while to figure this out, but we plan on getting started here soon and figuring out exactly what we can do and what makes sense to do. But I did want to make you aware of kind of my initial thoughts of where this project would be going. So if we could add more funding, that would be fantastic.
And that's the purpose of this complete street SHOPP funding.
Yeah, so if we have a shot at it, I would recommend let's throw in 8-foot sidewalk throughout the entire project scope, all the way up. Obviously, up by the nut plant, we probably would not go 8-foot sidewalk. I would say we should go 8-foot sidewalk up to the mini storage in our application that we would submit. That would be my suggestion. I don't know if all that funding is available. I would leave that up to our planning department here. But that would be my recommendation because I don't think there's much I can do through town.
Yeah. Paul, how does all this sound to you?
Well, first I want to say I'm thrilled with Caltrans. You don't hear that very often. But you know, if we back up and talk about the whole West Liberty signal, great partnership, great success. We're thrilled on that front. And now we greatly appreciate the deputy director over a year ago making that commitment on the east side for sidewalk. You know, frankly, I was extremely relieved to see it in that project description. You know, it was one thing to say he was going to put it in, but it's just super gratifying to see it there officially. So on that front, we're thrilled about the application to widen that sidewalk from Dollar General down to West Liberty. Huge supporter of that. To the comment just now by Chris, yeah, your exception approach makes sense to us. We could live with that, but if we could get Yvonne and Trent and whoever else to submit a funding request for that as well, that would be fantastic.
Any community opposition or business owner concerns you think would come up?
Well, yeah, this is Gridley we're talking about. So there would be some, what I just heard you say is we can pull it out to the street. And so it seems like that mitigates
I agree.
opposition. Yeah.
And that's what we're looking
Yeah,
at. It looks like we can. There's more studies that obviously need to be done there, but that is what we would be looking to do, is
Yeah.
go towards the street instead of out towards private property.
You do
And
stuff
I'll
like
just say
that.
this. I'll say this, on the east side in the segment we're talking, it's mostly all positive ownership. Most of the time the negative stuff has come from the west side. So I don't know really of anyone who's a critic or opposition in the area we're talking about on the east side.
Wow. East side and west side politics. Wow.
Well, I know
Good.
that Ford would not be happy if we put a sidewalk in front of their building, because they park their cars right up to the basically right up to the highway.
Right.
So that would be a tough sell with Ford.
Okay, so we have another Zoom at 9. John does here, but so Trin, it's the ball's in your court to craft out, take the first iteration at that 3-page with some cost estimates. I think it's a great approach with some traffic calming elements that'll benefit the community and make the corridor safer.
Yep.
Any last questions? Trin, you got the app, right?
Yes, we do. And then
Okay.
Kevin and Chris, I will probably reach out for just some cost estimates. I'll look and see if they're in the report, Chris, that you sent. That will be a good basis for the cost estimates that we'll be putting together, preliminary cost estimates. And the 3 items we have is the 8-foot sidewalk that we mentioned, pedestrian crossing, and that the Cherry Street project, guys, would be really good to get the full PS&E costs. You just completed that there in town. I call it the Cherry Street pedestrian crossing. That would give us a good cost basis estimate for at least one other crossing that we'll propose. And the main objective is stay within the right-of-way.
Yeah.
And look at trying to get an 8-foot path all along the east side, knowing that some portions in town development may be a little challenging, so we'll be flexible there. And just as everybody knows, and Paul, I think it's been great that the city is really painted red, no parking all the way through town. So that gives us some additional pavement to look at to see what's best. We don't have parking, any vehicles that break down can pull over into parking lots and other side streets there. Does that sound about right? So,
Hey, Trin, I just want to point out, though, and I want to make sure everybody's aware, one of the key components of this program is community outreach. And so one of the things that's in the guidance that was sent out from Sue, and it states engagement activities should be at a level necessary to determine preliminary buy-in from local stakeholders and community members. So I know that there have been meetings, and I feel like we can probably kind of
Take credit for that. Absolutely.
Take credit for it, but I think that, what you're saying is that most of the opposition was on the west side and of the street, and and not so much on the east side, and kind of play off of that. But it also states that further outreach may be warranted if project is selected to move forward. So then if this is selected by headquarters, we'll do more public outreach and public engagement, most likely virtually. But just kind of make sure you're putting that into the application of the outreach that was done and things like that.
Very good.
And Trent,
Yep.
Do not mention any opposition.
No.
In the ground.
We've done their outreach. We understand the concerns, and those are being addressed by what we're proposing. But we will have additional outreach. Yeah.
Okay. And Trent, do you have Chris's contact information?
Yes, I do now, Chris, and and then Kevin. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. All right. So we're working.
And
on
I'm
the
not sure how
application
much I'm going to be able to assist with cost estimates. And so, Chris, I'm hoping that you can be able to assist with that. And maybe Trin just kind of work through Nima on this, and he can kind of be that middle person. And Nima and I can chat and things like that. So,
Hey,
Sure. Yeah, once we
Kevin,
know what
is there
is going to be included, we could definitely work that out.
awesome.
does anything need to happen, or a recommendation if different agencies are going through District 3? Does this have to play into priorities within the district, the headquarters, or how's that play out?
We are going to, I believe it's next week, kind of develop a criteria as we start getting these applications in, and then we're going to use that criteria to determine which projects we're actually going to move forward to headquarters.
Got it. And we'll talk more about that. Just a suggestion for the criteria, I suggest you start by alphabetical order in District 3 region.
Of course, that's always the way we go, right?
You know it. Okay. If there's a need to have a follow-up Zoom meeting, then I'll send that out. Everybody good?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, and I'm real sorry for being late.
That's okay. Very good.
Okay,
Thanks,
apology accepted. No worries. All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.